Welcome back, friends! I'm back from my month away, and I missed you all so much. While I was gone, I rearranged some of my shelves so that none of my disc games are on their sides anymore. Doesn't it look so neat now? I've been thinking more about preservation lately, now that some of these old things that I've held onto for years are suddenly becoming valuable. So in order to make the fragile medium last a little longer, I gave each game its own space on the shelf. And speaking of discs, to kick off my return, today we're going to be exploring more of my old weird video game collection and talking about a console near and dear to my heart, the PlayStation 1. As explained in the last collection video, my game collection isn't necessarily impressive or full of all the classic great games that most collectors go after. Instead, my collection is just really weird, as in strange. I have a lot of odds and ends and pieces that don't make a lot of sense together, and some that are just truly bizarre. I thought it might be fun to share how my odd mishmash of junk all came together, so in this video I'm going to share with you more of the stories of how or why I ended up with the games and systems that I have. I don't get a chance to talk about games outside of Nintendo systems very often, but I actually grew up with the PlayStation more than the Nintendo 64 because of how much cheaper the games were. I only had 4 Nintendo 64 games as a kid, whereas I had a nice little library of PlayStation games to choose from. So I'm not actually a Nintendo loyalist. From the beginning, I've been playing whatever I can get my hands on. The story of this console actually begins when I was over at a friend's house. They were playing Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, and although I thought the game was gorgeous and looked like a lot of fun, they refused to let me play because I was a girl. These days, I hope that this attitude is less common now that gaming is more mainstream. But coming off of the era where video games were marketed as toys for boys, when I was a young kid, I would have a lot of male friends not let me play their video games when we hung out together, just because I was a girl and girls weren't supposed to play games. Some even feared that my gross girl cooties would outright break their consoles if I went anywhere near them. At the time, I was kind of sick of it, and I really just wanted to play Spyro, so I asked my dad if I could have a PlayStation, and luckily for me, they had just come out with this budget version of the console that was significantly cheaper. The controller that came with the system had analog sticks, but a lot of games didn't use them because earlier PlayStation controllers only had a D-pad. He also got me a copy of Spyro the Dragon. Unfortunately, it took a little while for me to figure out that I needed a memory card, because the Nintendo 64 didn't need one, so I had no idea how the games were supposed to save. I played the first homeworld of Spyro over and over again until finally my mom got me this blue one at the video store. Down the line, I also ended up with this other one secondhand. Although I didn't get a copy of Spyro 2 until years and years later, I did also get Year of the Dragon, which ended up being my favorite of the trilogy. Rather than being limited to just a few games that I really wanted like on the N64, with the PlayStation it was much easier to get lots of games to try. My dad would go to a used CD store and pick up a ton of games for me dirt cheap. One of his coworkers recommended the Tomb Raider series when he heard that my dad's daughter was getting into gaming, because there weren't a lot of other video games at the time that had female playable characters. So he started with Tomb Raider 1, and my dad and my sister and I would have a blast playing through the first level and laughing at Lara Croft's tank controls and sadistically trying to figure out all of her unique death animations. Did you know you could do this? But why? From then on, every weekend my dad would have a new used Tomb Raider game from the CD store for us to try. So I ended up with the entire series, and every single game we'd make sure to lock the creepy butler in the meat freezer. These games are actually really fun. They have a lot of the same gameplay as a Zelda game, just with tank controls. So if you've never tried them out and you can get past the controls being part of the difficulty, I recommend them. Tomb Raider Anniversary also solves a lot of that problem, so if you want to try that instead, that's a good option. There was also a phenomenon of budget titles for the system. These were even cheaper than the regular PlayStation games, and they'd usually be in a little bin near the checkout at the electronics store. So if I ever needed to go along with my dad on an errand, I'd usually end up picking up one of these games. Out of the bargain bin, I got A1 Snowboarding, NASCAR Racing, Ford Truck Mania, a Tiny Toon Adventures game, SpongeBob Super Sponge, and Lilo and Stitch. I actually rented Lilo and Stitch from the video store to try it before I bought it, which is funny in hindsight because it's a not very good Crash Bandicoot clone, but I guess I was easy to please back then. The only other game I got back then, not from the used CD store or from the bargain bin, was Harvest Moon: Back to Nature. I saw it one day when I was out with my grandparents, and I thought the character on the cover looked like he belonged in a Pokemon game. Thankfully, my grandparents were super sweet and got the game for me. I was relentlessly teased when I started calling my backpack at school a rucksack. So that's a lot more games for one system than I think I grew up with for anything else. But even then, most of my PlayStation games I didn't get until I started making money in my early adulthood. For shits and giggles, I picked up the Land Before Time Great Valley Racing Adventure for just $1, just because I have to wonder what inspired these developers to make a Land Before Time racing game. And it was literally only $1. Spice World was another curiosity pickup. $3 whole, because although I was a massive Spice Girls fan during the PlayStation years, I had never known there was a game. I mean, calling it a game is being generous anyway. It's mostly like a song splicer mixed with a bunch of endless interview footage about inane things, like what the favorite ice cream flavor of each one of them was. I grew up playing a lot of licensed Rugrats games on PC and Game Boy, but somehow never got any for a major console back then. I remembered seeing advertisements for Rugrats Search for Reptar on TV, so I picked it up along with Studio Tour to see what I missed out on. So here's a top secret Tama fact. Way back in the day, like when I was in high school, I had a secret second channel that was in no way connected to my main channel. For that channel, I made like 2 episodes of a Let's Play of this game, and it somehow ended up getting more views than a lot of my videos get today. So I've always wanted to revisit it and make a proper video about it. Maybe someday the Spin Dash universe will collide with the Tama universe, and that will become a reality. Now we're getting into the games I bought for videos territory, and at least 1/4 of all the games I have were for that purpose. Powerpuff Girls Chemical Extraction was for the review of that game, the Mary-Kate and Ashley games and the Barbie games were for the Games for Girls video, Rugrats Totally Angelica was for the video about my least favorite game of all time, and Cool Borders 2 I actually got for a long lost video I once made about snowboarding games. This funky looking game, Kill League, was one of the PlayStation launch titles, and was fittingly a game I got for a video I was once working on about launch titles that I never finished. I never knew until I started working on that video that early on, PlayStation 1 games came in long cases like this. I'm glad they cut that out, because these are really fragile and hard to replace. For a lot of people, the PlayStation was known as the JRPG system, where most of the best JRPGs of the era came out, due to discs being able to hold more data than carts. I never got to play anything heavier than Harvest Moon though, so I always thought of it as the ultimate 3D platformer console thanks to Tomb Raider and Spyro. But I did eventually get my hands on some JRPGs for the system, like Brave Fencer, Musashi, and Chrono Cross. Final Fantasy VII I found while thrifting during my first few weeks in Portland, along with this nice multi-tap. The rarest game in my collection, Tales of Destiny 2, ironically is I think the only game I own that can take advantage of the multi-tap, since it has multiplayer co-op only if you have one of these connected. Although the PlayStation was easily the most popular console at the time, I don't hear it get a lot of love from retro gaming enthusiasts, and it deserves some praise. It was nice to have something so accessible when I had to make the choice to push back against the social cues I was getting from my peers at the time and really dive headfirst into gaming. Spyro in particular was a great gateway into so many other kinds of games for me. It was so inviting and easy to learn even with no prior 3D platforming literacy. The PlayStation's library can be kind of overwhelming for a collector because I think there are close to 2,000 games for this thing, or maybe more, I don't know. But you can't go wrong with the classics. Some of them have aged really well, and I still enjoy playing them today, and some of them not so much, but I do have some great memories with all of them. And though I may not be expanding the collection much from here on out, I'm happy with what I do have. If you've got a PlayStation game you think I would like, why don't you let me know in the comments? I don't know a lot about what else is on the console. I think now we have officially covered everything in my very first console generation, so next time we'll move on to something a little more cube-shaped. See ya!